Hi, and welcome to a Superstack demo. My name is Sean, and I'll be guiding you through the process of creating a preschool review website where you can review preschools. So this, of course, is the Superstack, and you can use the Superstack for yourself by navigating to mysuperstack.io. The first thing we need to do, of course, is log in. So go ahead, if you don't have an account, click Create Account, and if you do, go ahead and log in. Cool. So this is a list of all my Superstack projects. What I'm going to do is create a second project. Okay. I can go ahead and submit that, and I will get a new Superstack project. Now I can go ahead and I can go into this project, and I'm greeted with a whole bunch of information. So we can go ahead and create an API key. And the reason we want to do this is so that we can plug our application into the Superstack. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to hit Create API key. When I do that, I'm going to get an access token and I'm going to get a secret token. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy both of these, and then I'm going to flip to our backend where we can start doing some implementation. Okay, so this is our backend, and here we're using Python. So what we can do is go ahead and plug in our API keys. So I have this little Superstack.Pi file here. It just helps us make an API client. Now this API client comes from our Python-based Superstack SDKs. Now you'll see that we have three default headers we want to set up. The first two are those access and secret tokens. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and copy mine over from the API key I created in the Superstack dashboard, like that. And now for the last piece of information, we need to go back to the Superstack. So if we're looking at the Superstack, if we scroll up to the top, we need to copy this project ID and set that up in our headers as well. Go ahead, we'll copy that, go back to the back end now, and we can paste that in. And now we have done everything we need to do to integrate with our Superstack project. Let's go ahead and we're going to look at the front end of our website. Here's the demo browser. So it doesn't really look like much at the moment. The home page just says preschools, and below here is where we'd expect a list of preschools. And when we click into a preschool, we'd expect to go to like a preschool overview page, and that is where we would be able to see and leave reviews for a particular preschool. And so now if we go back to that front end code, first is this preschool overview. And so we have kind of three different API endpoint calls we're going to make. The first one at the top here just saves a new review. The second one here gets the information for the particular preschool we selected. And the last one gets all of the reviews. And then if we look at the home page for our demo, we have one very simple call here. And all this is doing is getting all of the preschools. Let's go ahead and implement our backend using the Superstack. So if we switch back to the backend, so we have four endpoints here. We have one that gets all the preschools. We have one that gets a particular preschool. We have one that gets all the reviews for a particular preschool. And we have one that lets us make a new review for a preschool. So let's implement these. So we'll start with get preschools. The first thing we need to do is create an instance of the SDK. So to do that, we're going to use the Places service. So this is a service inside of the Superstack. And the Places API is imported directly from our SDK. So using this Places API, we'll create a new instance of it. And we need to pass this instance our API client. And then from there, all we have to do is hit the search places endpoint. And we'll take the data from the response. Now there's one small little trick here. So right now I'm demonstrating our experimental SDK. And because of that, there's a couple little inconsistencies with the SDK. So sometimes we need to skip the deserialization, and instead we'll just do that ourselves. But really, this doesn't add much code or complexity. Okay, so that's all we need to do. We can save that. I have a process running that should hot reload anytime we make changes. So now we should have a working endpoint. How cool is that? Okay, so if we go ahead and we look at our demo, you'll see that the page is still blank. Well, it's because we haven't added any preschools yet. I'm just going to create a new preschool for us. Okay, so I've created a couple sample preschools here. Ignore my typo. This was supposed to say kids, of course. What we can do is now we see that we can go and we can look at a particular preschool. And this is what that page would look like. However, we're missing a bunch of information and we can't exactly save our new reviews at this point in time. So let's switch back to the back end and let's take a look at how we might do that. So going back to our router, what we need to do first is implement the get preschool endpoint so that we can render information about the preschool on the preschool overview page. So we can copy this SDK line from up here. We're just creating another places service SDK, and we're going to do something super similar. We're going to call get place this time. And when we call get place, we got to give it some parameters so it knows what place we want to get. And so we'll pass in the ID of a place, and that's of type string schema. And we take in a string right here as a path parameter. And so we'll just pass that right in. And then the only other thing we have to do here is once again, tell our endpoint to skip deserialization. And then just, of course, wrap this in something that's going to deserialize. Yeah, so now if I save that, what we can do is hop back to our browser and you will see that our page now includes information about the preschool, including the name and the address. Now we want to render all of the reviews for a particular preschool. So here's where something changes just a little bit. So because we're not talking about places anymore, we're talking about reviews. So when we create our SDK object, we want to use the reviews API. And so we can set that up. And again, we just got to pass in our API client. And now all we need to do is search for some reviews. Now, reviews works a little more cleanly with the experimental SDK in that we don't need to skip deserialization. So we will pass this some path parameters. And we need to pass it a few different things. So the first is something called an entity type. And that's a string. And that string is going to take a hard-coded value called preschool. The next thing we need to pass it is an entity ID. And that also takes in a string schema. And in this case, we're going to take in the string that we pass from here into our endpoint, and we'll go ahead and use it here. And I see I made just a little typo there. Switch those around and we're good. And the last piece we need to do is just tell this that we want to return the body. And so we can save this. And if we hop back and we look at our browser, you can see that nothing's really changed. And of course, that's because we haven't left any reviews yet for it to render. So that's the final implementation detail that we need to tackle here. Okay, so switching back to the backend now, let's go ahead and implement this create preschool review endpoint. So we take in a couple parameters to this endpoint. The first is a preschool, and that's our path parameter, just like we've done for these two endpoints above. The second one is the body or the payload to our endpoint. And this is of type preschool review. Preschool review is defined right here, and all it takes in is a string called content. So we can reuse this reviews API here, and then we can go ahead and create a new review. This is going to require a couple parameters. The first is a couple path parameters, and those path parameters really mirror this get preschool reviews one from up here. So our entity type will again be hard-coded to preschool, but our entity ID will be a string schema of preschool. And again, that's our path parameter to this endpoint. The second parameter is called body. And of course, this is the payload that we're sending to the Superstack. And in this case, it's of type create review. Now, where do you get this create review from? Well, you can import it directly from the Python SDK. So what do we need to pass this? So because we're not using numeric reviews, we'll just set both of those to anything really that we care about. So one each works perfectly. And then we'll set the text of our review to a string schema, and that string schema will take in our review content. And then finally, we'll just add a dot body here, and finally add in a return, and we're good. We can flip back to the browser, and here we have our preschool for parents, and we can leave some sort of review here. If we save that, we can see our review. If we refresh this, we see our review gets loaded back in, so we can leave another review. And we save that. Now we have both. We refresh, we get both. If we go back to the home page, we can look at our school for students and kids, and we have no reviews here yet, so we can leave the first review. And when we do that, we can see we get our new review. And that's how you use the Superstack. My name was Sean. Again, you can check out the services page on the Superstack website. Here's all of the services we offered today. And if you go into these, you can see the pricing, you can see some getting started information, everything that you need. If you want to learn more about what SDKs we offer, go to this getting started page, scroll down here. Here's all of our SDKs, and you could look at the Python SDK as an example. Hope you enjoyed learning more about the Superstack, and I can't wait to see what you Superstack next.